Welcome back to the Big Life Podcast, a place where we explore what it takes to live with intention, conviction, and courage. I'm Neal Oates Jr., and today we're diving into one of the most transformational tools any person can develop, your personal philosophy. Now, it might sound simple, but your philosophy quietly determines everything. What you chase, what you settle for, what you say no to, how you show up in adversity, and ultimately how you build a future that you can be proud of. Most people don't realize this, but their philosophy is already running in the background. The real question is, did you build it intentionally, or did life hand it to you by default? I'm excited about this one because it's foundational. It's the difference between drifting through life, there's that word, Robin, drifting through life, and designing your life.
It's so good. I love this topic, Neal. My name is Robin, as you guys, our current listeners already know. But if you're new to our podcast, my name is Robin. And I love this topic because it strikes at the core of identity. Whether you realize it or not, the story that you believe about yourself becomes the blueprint for the life that you build. A personal philosophy gives structure to that story. It becomes your internal compass. You know, it's guiding your decisions and guiding your relationships and guiding your faith walk. And it guides the way that you respond to life's most unpredictable moments. So we're talking about something that's key here. When someone lives without a clear philosophy, they end up shaped by the circumstances instead of being grounded in truth. And their life becomes reactionary instead of intentional. So that's what we're talking about today. So here we want to help our listeners to flip that script.
Welcome to the Big Life Podcast, where dreams aren't just imagined, they're built brick by brick, belief by belief. Hosted by Neal Oates Jr. and Robin Lewis, this show is your invitation to discover your amazing capabilities, invest in your growth, and unleash your potential in ways you've only dreamed of. Join Neal and Robin as they dive deep into stories, insights, and tools designed to inspire you to show up big, live intentionally, and give yourself away for the betterment of those around you. Get ready to rise to what you're truly worthy of. The Big Life starts now.
Okay, so Robin, that's good stuff. And I forgot to tell you, good morning. It's always a pleasure to see you, and I can't wait for us to have this conversation. Okay, so now we're going to start where we usually end up in our episodes with getting practical. So we're just going to start by making this very, very practical, Robin and audience. When I talk about a personal philosophy, I'm talking about the set of beliefs, values, and guiding principles that shape the way you interpret the world. And I know you love this idea of perspective, Robin, and I think that's absolutely vital that you're going to share a little bit of that maybe later. But it's your internal operating system, the unseen code behind the decisions you make every single day. And here's what I have learned. It's that your personal philosophy is what tells you how to think about failure. It determines how you show up in conflict. It dictates how you handle opportunity. And here's the big one. It shapes your response to pressure. And I believe that all of us have been in situations where we've been under pressure, and how we responded to that was a result of our personal philosophy. Because two people can go through the exact same situation. One collapses under it, the other one grows through it. The difference isn't the storm. It's the philosophy holding them up in the storm. A strong personal philosophy acts as your filter. It tells you, this aligns with who I am, that does not, this deserves my energy, that doesn't serve my purpose. And without that filter, you end up exhausted, confused, and constantly questioning yourself.
That's so powerful, Neal. And I love the way you're coming at this. What I love about this is that it touches every part of life. And I see it I see it all the time. When someone doesn't have a philosophy, they live according to whichever voice is loudest in the moment. I can say that to myself. When I lose sight of that philosophy, then I, dance to the beat of the loudest voice in the moment. Yeah. Sometimes it might be fear. I allow fear sometimes to get in the way of my philosophy. It might be comparison. I compare myself with others and where I think I should have been and I'm not. Or it might be culture, right? It might be expectation. In other words, the point is that without a personal philosophy, you become vulnerable to environments that don't have your best interest in mind. You become a chameleon, always shifting, always blending in, never standing firm on who you really are. One of my words for this year, Neal, is Joshua. And the idea is to be bold and courageous, to take a stand and to step out. And that's one of the things I've been trying to do. And it ties in with my philosophy. That's the only way that I'm going to live into who I am designed to be, who I'm becoming. And without a personal philosophy, you become vulnerable to environments as well. And the environments don't have your best interest in mind. But when you build a philosophy, you begin to move differently. You develop clarity, you develop discernment. You gain a sense of direction that doesn't get tossed around by the winds of one's opinion or the storms of circumstances. And the biggest benefit, I think, is that you gain peace because you're no longer wrestling with decisions because you already know what you stand for. And you stop apologizing for your boundaries. In fact, your boundaries become very clear and you're happy to stick to them. And you stop shrinking around people who don't share your values. And you start living from conviction instead of convenience. It's so powerful.
Robin, everything you said right there is the reason why I must have a strong personal philosophy. And it's not because I'm better than, it's because if not, I start apologizing for my boundaries. Then I start shrinking around people who don't share my values. I start living from a place of convenience. And that's a big one for me, as I'll share a little bit later. But everything you just said is what has helped me get through those tough times in life. And it didn't have to be anything big. What I realized is that without a personal philosophy, those small inconveniences would take me out, right? And so even before we go, you and we were together in person yesterday, and I was having some car issue, but I made it to our lunch, right? And the only reason I made it to lunch is because of my personal philosophy of leaving early, making sure I have plenty of time in case something happens. And then when I got there, I was relaxed and I was excited and I was able to be locked in with you. And that's just a small example, but I did not let that frazzle me. Otherwise, I would have missed some amazing gems and conversation and connection that we got to experience. So now we're going to dig into why my personal philosophy is so essential if you want to live the big life, right? Because here's the truth. Big lives are built on big principles, not big moments. And Robin, forgive me. I wish it was the other way around sometimes. I wish that I could just have one or two big moments and that would make my big life.
Don't we all?
Sir. Wait, so you too? I just want to make sure you too?
Come on, man.
Man, because I'm telling you, and it's a challenge, and we're going to get back on track here. I'm glad to hear you say, don't we all, right? Because you look at people and you say, I like this guy, I like this gal, I want to be like them. And then you see that they share the same struggles that you have. And then all of us are saying, yes, we want the big life. We have to have big principles, not big moments. Because if I was chasing after a moment, Robin, my life would be so much easier because I could say I could manufacture a big moment. What about you?
Yeah, exactly. That's the point. I think we all could, and that's what we want to do, right? But yeah, it's a little bit more than just a moment, right? As
And
John Maxwell said, it's a process. It's a daily.
why do throughout my day, and I'm just going to go ahead and tell you this, throughout my day, every time I think about success, you know what I think about? I think about Robin Lewis pointing uphill and all the time. And he's always talking about everything worthwhile is uphill all the way.
All
And
the
I'm
time.
sitting here and I'm like, all the time, sir. So here's why a personal philosophy is so important. And this is why Robin and I are going to encourage you later and now to start developing your personal philosophy. It's because a personal philosophy gives your life direction. It keeps you from drifting. Man. So, Robin, it is now a good time for me to share that I drifted in my business and I had to go from drift to drive, as Chris would say. And I had to recommit to you and share with you some things, some areas in my professional life where I had drifted. And this just keeps showing up over and over in today's episode. Why is that? Why is it that we drift before we even go any further, sir?
Yeah, so I mean, if we're thinking along the lines of this idea of personal philosophy, I think sometimes we can lose sight of it, right? We lose sight of the bigger picture. Life gets in the way sometimes. Things happen. You mentioned life is uphill and it's uphill all the way, and so sometimes it's easy to get off track, right? Because we're always pushing. And so, but there are many different reasons why that could happen. Don't you agree? I mean, one clearly is that we have arrived someplace to, and sometimes we can drift because we get comfortable with where we
Yeah,
are, right?
absolutely.
Which is still ties into the whole idea of the personal philosophy. Probably is heading beyond where we just arrived, but we lose sight of that.
Yeah. Okay, so the personal philosophy is going to keep you from drifting, or if you do drift, it's going to get you back on track. Right? It helps you choose your goals intentionally instead of chasing everything that's shiny object syndrome, especially in the real estate market. Right? It also reduces decision fatigue, and this is a huge one for me. Most people are tired not because life is hard, and this is my belief. They're not tired because life is hard, but because they have no framework for making decisions. Every situation becomes a brand new negotiation with themselves. And we know those conversations, those negotiations can be daunting and taxing. But when your philosophy is clear, your yes is clear, your no is clear, and your life becomes simpler, not easy, but simpler. And I'll add this: a personal philosophy becomes your accountability partner. Before you can be accountable to another person, before I can be accountable to Robin or my dirty dozen, I must be accountable to my own principles. And once again, this has saved me more times than I can count. So when life gets challenging, and it will, Robin said it, I've said it, and we know this, your personal philosophy becomes the backbone that keeps you standing when your emotions just want to sit down. It's one of the most powerful forms of self-leadership, that personal philosophy.
I agree with that. And the most important person and the first person to lead well is yourself. And because most people think they have a motivation problem, right?
Mhm.
When they actually have a clarity problem. They don't know who they are and what they believe or what they stand for. We forget that. And that's what we're talking about here with a personal philosophy. And so what happens then is that our actions keep shifting. A strong personal philosophy also protects your identity. That's the point. When life shakes you, you don't lose yourself. When people misunderstand you, you don't shrink because people misunderstand you. It's not on you, right?
Mhm.
When seasons change, you don't become someone that you're not. It makes you dangerous in a good way because now you're anchored. You're anchored. And if you don't define your philosophy, someone else will. Society will tell you what success is. Pain will tell you what you're worth. And fear will tell you what's possible.
Hmm.
Are you hearing us this morning, our listeners? But when you define it, you start shaping your life from the inside out. So instead of being shaped from the outside in, you're being shaped from the inside out. And if you want to live the big life, you have to think big thoughts. And big thoughts come from deep beliefs and grounded values and an identity that's rooted in truth.
Robin, you said so much there. And so there are times when, and here's where I have to think about my own personal philosophy. So you say some of those things and how society would tell me what success is, and then fear would tell me what is possible, and then all these other things. And then I think of when I did not have a strong personal philosophy and where that took me here. Right. And then the results that I was seeing because of the actions that I took, because of the thoughts that I believed. Right.
Yeah.
And so that really is that root that impacts everything else. So now we're going to attempt, and I believe we're going to do a good job knowing the caliber of gentlemen that we are. We're going to attempt to give the listeners a blueprint for creating their own personal philosophy. And this is so important that Robin and I, we want you to create your own philosophy. We don't want you to adopt ours. We want you to consider, to think, who do you want to be? So I'm going to break this into 5 powerful steps, just 5. I believe that our audience can start implementing and to create their own philosophy. First, and this number 1 is number 1. Do this one first. Identify your core values. These are the commitments you refuse to compromise: faith, integrity, compassion, courage, or excellence, because your values determine who you are when no one is looking. So that's the first one. Make sure that we identify our core values. Number 2, name your guiding principles. These are the statements you live by. These become your written anchors. And I always have mine close by. So my principles, my guiding anchors they're tattered a little bit, but I always keep them nearby. Purpose over convenience. Discipline protects desire. I speak life into the rooms I enter. And so those are just some of the examples. But when you define these principles, your life gains structure, and structure protects us, ladies and gentlemen. Number 3 is define your identity. We just heard Robin talk about identity. Ask yourself, who am I becoming? What kind of leader do I want to be? What kind of spouse or parent? What do I want people to consistently experience when I show up? All of that is rooted in your identity. And then we have number 4, establish your non-negotiables. This is key for me. These are the behaviors that will not fluctuate based on mood or circumstance. Show up, tell the truth, keep your word, honor your commitments, let your yes mean yes and your no mean no. And then the last step of creating your philosophy is to craft a personal philosophy statement. And this is where you take all of the above and shape it into a declaration. And here's what that declaration will be. It's going to be something that says, this is how I live. This is the type of person I am. These are the boundaries that protect my purpose. And you'll find that your philosophy becomes the manifesto you return to when life gets loud. And here's what Robin's going to tell you: life will get loud.
Wow. I love that 5-step process, sir. That's so powerful. And I think it's something that oftentimes we skip. People skip doing that sort of work because they think it's too deep or maybe too abstract. But this clearly is the foundation of transformation. When we can really get clarity around, when we can take those steps that Neal just described, we're going to become, powerful people moving towards our purpose and living a life that is affecting and adding value to others. And we're going to live into who we are. We're going to live into, who you are as a listener. That's sometimes I bore my wife with saying this, Neal, but because I say it a lot, and that is that if we don't get you, the world misses out. But that's so true, because if you think about the idea that there's nobody else just like you, there's nobody else. And so if you're not clear about those things, so I'm just encouraging you to take the time to do that. And what I would also add to that, Neal, is to encourage our listeners to give themselves permission to be honest. Don't write what sounds good. Don't write what you think somebody else thinks you should put there, right? It should reflect both who you are and who you aspire to be. And so sometimes, we're skipping to the drumbeat of what others think and who others think we should be. And so be honest, with yourself. Don't be afraid to include the hard truths too about how you handle pressure or conflict and love and responsibility and faith and growth. Include those things in your philosophy. How do you handle those things, right? What is your philosophy in regards to those things? And your philosophy should be a mirror that shows you your potential. It should be a map that keeps you aligned with your calling. See how powerful this is? When you're clear about what you believe, you walk differently. You speak differently, right? You act differently. You forgive differently. You choose differently. You love differently. A personal philosophy doesn't just change your mind. It changes your life. This is powerful stuff, Neal.
Robin, I was with you until you said you forgive differently, right? And so this is one where I had a personal philosophy that had gaps in it. And then being around people such as yourself, listening to John Maxwell, making sure that I read and that I educate and that I'm always saying, well, how can I be a better version of myself? And so, ladies and gentlemen, your initial personal philosophy, there may be gaps, but we are going to encourage you. This is an ongoing process that you say, well, hold on, Robin mentioned forgiveness. And I do want to say something, Robin, and I would like for you, if you're willing to just touch on this a little bit. You said, don't be afraid to include hard truths about how you handle, of course, you put things like pressure, conflict, responsibility, but then you even put love in there and faith and growth. So why do we need a philosophy on how we handle these seemingly good things when you be like, oh, how do I handle love? I accept it. Like growth, oh yeah, that's a good thing. But you're even encouraging us, hey, how do you handle? Maybe there's some hard truths around love, faith, growth, and responsibility. Would you just expound upon that just a little bit, sir?
Yeah, I think of the 11th commandment, Neal. The 11th commandment says, thou shalt not kid thyself. And I think that's what it's about, even love, like let's just use love for an example. Love is not pretty all the time, right? Love means sacrifice. Love means
Hold on, Robin.
putting the
When
other
I think of
person
love,
first.
I think of the little red heart on Valentine's Day. You're telling me that's not what real love is.
Come on, man. You know it. And so, that's the reason why we need to have clarity around those types of things. Growth, talk about growth. Growth doesn't just happen, man. We have to be intentional about it, right? We have to, in fact, you and I, growth is a daily thing. We want to suggest to our listeners that growth should be a daily thing for you. What is your philosophy around growth? Forgiveness. Neal, you're right, by the way, in sharing gaps. I mean, forgiveness is one that I realized later in my life. I mean, not that long ago, just a few years ago, for proper perspective, where I realized that there are some things I hadn't even forgiven myself about. And so, I think it's being honest about where you are too in terms of what your philosophy is. Like I didn't even realize that I hadn't forgiven myself. Does that make sense? And so that's why I think we have to go through those things as well and be clear about how we want to approach. What do we believe about those things? Who do we want to be when it comes to those things? I want to be that person that forgives, but I'm not always that person that does.
So I was having a conversation with a gentleman, Brett Culp, and I said, what do you want to be when you grow up? And it was the best answer I've ever received to that question. And so much so that I'm reminded of it months after our interview. He says, when I grow up, I want to be the person who responds to everything from the place of love. I want my first response to be from a place of love. And he says, I'm a long way from that because many times my first response is from a place of judgment. And I said, ooh. And so months later, I still remember that. And now part of my personal philosophy, right, filling that gap is, can I respond? Can my first response be from a place of love? Now, that might be tough love. It might be nurturing love, but from a place of love. And so now, Robin, you and I were going to share with our audience some personal examples and maybe some personal reflection of some of our personal philosophies or principles that we have. So I'm going to share one of mine, and this one is close to my heart. Is that I choose purpose over convenience. And so convenience, and I can only speak for Neal, maybe one or two of our audience members will agree, but convenience is seductive, right? It whispers my name in the night. It's like the sirens in the Odyssey. It makes you comfortable, but too much comfort makes you stagnant. Purpose stretches me. It requires more of me. It demands excellence. It forces me to grow. That's exactly what you were talking about. And so this philosophy keeps me grounded when an easier option presents itself. It reminds me that the path of least resistance rarely leads to the life that I'm called to live. The path of least resistance rarely, if ever, leads to the big life. And that's what I want. So I have to go ahead before that whisper, before that sweet song of comfort or convenience starts echoing in my ears. I have to go ahead and make that decision that these principles are here to protect me and move me towards the big life.
Yeah, I like that. That's so true. And it's good. I'm glad that we're sharing examples of this because I think our listeners will get to recognize that they have personal philosophy already too. Maybe they just haven't defined it that way.
Right.
And then once you recognize that you have them, you can also be intentional about your personal philosophy. Neal, one that comes to mind for me when it comes to leadership is I lead with support and challenge. So this philosophy guides the way that I show up in relationships, husband and wife relationships, friendships, family, other family members, coaching. It shows up in ministry. It shows up in leadership. It shows up in business. Support opens the heart, right? And support is care. I believe I am here for you. But challenge sets people free. What I mean by that is when I feel tempted to avoid hard conversations, which is easy for me to do. I don't like to confront. Sometimes I feel like when I confront somebody, they're going to take it wrong. They're going to take it as me putting them down. They're going to think I don't believe in them, that type of thing. So I'm tempted to avoid hard conversations. That is a reality for me. Or maybe soften what needs to be said, right? Well, this principle, it realigns me because it helps me to balance grace and accountability. It keeps me anchored in both kindness and clarity because I know that in relationships, in leadership, in ministry, both are needed. And so that's how I want to show up.
Robin, I'm going to jump in here. You've mentioned the word clarity numerous times.
Yeah.
Clarity, clarity, clarity. And you also mentioned that many people, it's not a motivation problem, it's a clarity problem, right? It's a clarity issue, a lack of clarity.
Yeah.
For you, when did clarity become so important to you? Or was there a time when all of a sudden you were like, hey, maybe if I just got clearer on what I want out of life or out of this business opportunity or this relationship, things would be smoother? When did clarity in your life just become that foundational thing that if I can gain more clarity in the conversation or with the problem or the situation or even with what I want, that things would be simpler, not easy, but simpler? Do you recall a time like that?
I mean, I don't remember I can tell you different experiences that I've had, for example, but I don't remember a time when that just became, I think over time it becomes more and more obvious of the situation in so many different aspects. So from a leader, from a, with Edna and myself. My wife is Edna for our listeners. If we don't have, if I don't have clear expectations, then how can I expect her to even know, much less act? Right. And I think when it comes to the challenge and support on, there are times, there are many times, more than I want to admit, where I've had to have the conversation with somebody, and this happened a lot at work, where I had to apologize. Hey, listen, I just want you to know I am sorry. I have sort of allowed this to happen to the point where you probably don't even know that it's an issue, because I have allowed it to happen. And I apologize to you for that. That's on me. And what I want to do now, though, is take the time to bring clarity around what the expectations are.
That's good.
I've had to make enough of those types of conversations that I realize the more that I can bring clarity up front, is the better it's going to be for all of us. So that's an example that I can use. But clearly, when it comes to things like what we're talking about, it's also evolved, because I understand values even better now. I have more clarity around what my values are. I have more clarity around my identity. So that's something that I think, even as important as that it took time of working through, living life, going through, the ups and downs of getting to the place where I understood, where things became more clear. I think that's really what happened. I got more clarity, and the more clarity you get is the better you're able to move forward. And so I hope I answered your question, Neal.
No, you answered it absolutely thoroughly. And unfortunately, I was hoping that you were going to give me a silver bullet. I'm always looking for a shortcut, even decades into this growth and having a personal philosophy. That's why I need people like you in my life to say, Neal, quit looking for see, once again, I'm looking for convenience. See, right there. I'm looking for convenience.
That's Robin, right? That's Robin. So it did take me a while, but there is a book that John Maxwell wrote, it's called Today Matters. The idea behind the book is that if we can choose our values at an early age and then spend the rest of our life managing that, then we're going to have a successful and meaningful and productive life. So he suggests choosing those values early on in life and then managing those decisions on a daily basis. So we do have to manage those decisions. And so what I'm sharing with you is Robin, I had a challenge with that,
So I would tell you that you are special, but you're not so unique that that's only your story, because I'm right there with you, fortunately and unfortunately. But Robin, here's what we know, and here's what we're going to tell our listeners. It's easy to talk about philosophy when life is good, right? When the sun is shining and there are no clouds in the sky. But the real strength of your philosophy is measured in adversity. Hard seasons test your identity. They're going to test your commitment. They're going to test your convictions. And if your philosophy is weak, it collapses under pressure. And make sure that you hear me when I say if your philosophy is weak, not if you are a weak individual. If that thing that you've built your life upon is weak, then it's going to collapse under pressure. But when it's strong, it becomes the thing that gets you through the pressure. It becomes the voice that says, you're built for this. And so I always go back to the scripture that says, for such a time as this. That philosophy, that strong philosophy, becomes a reminder that says, this moment doesn't get to rewrite who I am. A personal philosophy is not just for clarity. It's for survival. And I think that when you can have clarity around your personal philosophy, then you'll look back and say, as I've said numerous times, the only thing that helped me survive was my philosophy, my belief, so that I did the right thing, so I trusted the right thing, so that and I'll just tell the audience, a big piece of my philosophy is rooted in the principles in God's word. right? So me knowing what God says about me and who I am and what I can do and my responsibility keeps me from hearing that voice of society or getting my wealth from likes and all of that. So that has helped me survive those tough times. Without a strong personal philosophy, I would not be the man that I am today.
Wow. Yeah. I know for time's sake, I'm going to move on, but I want to pause here so much. But the one thing that I would say is this, is not only does it help you to move forward in adversity, but what it does is it creates your legacy. Because how you show up in the times of adversity is how you're going to affect those closest to you.
Yeah.
How you show up in times of adversity defines who you are. It defines your legacy. It's so important that's why I wanted to stay there for a little bit. But let's move on, Neal. Your philosophy becomes your truth when everything feels uncertain. That's the point. It anchors you when emotions rise. It brings you back to the center. Well, it's the reason why on the pickleball court, Robin has to remind himself of who he is to be, right? So I've gotten caught. I've shared with you. I've gotten caught off of that. And so I've had to remind myself of my philosophy and how I want to show up on the pickleball court. Yes, sir.
Robin,
I'm sorry.
here's what I want to say. Man, you are one of the most put together, level headed individuals, people I have ever met. And pickleball brings it out of you.
It's amazing. I have a friend that I play pickleball with him. We used to play tennis before, and he said, "Man, you got to be amazed. You see Robin, this calm, cool guy, in the conference room and in the meetings and so on. But you catch him on the tennis court and the pickleball court, he's a different guy, man."
Rob,
I'm
man,
very competitive, very
when
competitive.
and the reason I bring this up is when things were frantic and crazy and the house flooded, I call you and you like, this is a traumatic time for me, and you keep me calm and you walk us through the process and it's going to be okay. And you're checking in and I'm like, Rob, there's water coming. And what do we do? And you're like, no, this and whatever. And so and here's what's wild in that area, like your legacy in that area, you're like, man, Rob is Mr. Cool, right? He is the guy and the principle's there. And with you sharing that, it reminds us that we're going to have to always be aware of that. I just never thought it would be pickleball or the tennis court. I love it, man.
And why it's good for us to talk about things like this is because that's where philosophy helps. Like there are times, there are things that can trigger us. You learn some things about yourself, and then you have to be honest with yourself and recognize that it can trigger you to act in a way that's different than who you want to be.
Mm-hmm.
And so then you have to remind yourself, and it brings you back, right? So it reminds you of your identity. Also, when disappointments show up, it keeps you grounded in hope, right? A solid philosophy keeps you committed to the person that you said you wanted to become, especially when life tries to tempt you back into who you used to be, right? And if you want resilience, if you want peace, if you want consistency, you need a philosophy that is stronger than your feelings and that is deeper than your circumstances. And so we all need it. We need that. We all need it.
Absolutely. I'm telling you, I love what we're doing here on the Big Life Podcast. Ladies and gentlemen, if you've gained value from this, make sure that you like, share, comment, and then make sure you subscribe, that you keep coming back. But we want you to walk away with something practical. So here's your assignment for the week. So I am going to be the person that issues and offers challenge this week. Write down 3 things. One value that you will not compromise, one principle you will live by with consistency. So once again, that's one value you will not compromise, one principle you will live by with consistency, and then one identity statement that describes who you are becoming. And now who you are becoming, not who you are, but who you are becoming. And then begin writing your personal philosophy statement. Let it be honest. Robin talked about that mirror. Let it be bold. Let it challenge you. But most importantly, let it guide you.
Yeah, right on. And then revisit it often. It's as Neal and I have shared, there are times where you can get off of that, or you don't have the clarity, or it's not in the forefront. And so it has to be alive. Keep it alive. It grows as you grow, and it strengthens as you strengthen. But the moment that you write it down, as Neal is suggesting, you'll begin to live with clarity and conviction that many people never experience. And so there is something powerful and magical about writing it down. So don't miss that part. To our listeners, take the time. If you have to come back to this episode, come back to it. We'll have some show notes that you will help you to give you direction as you sit down to write these down.
Absolutely. So, Robin, I first want to tell you thank you for this episode. Thank you for your openness, your honesty, your vulnerability, and then just the conversation. Because as much as we are here to help others experience the big life, every time I'm here, I move a little closer to my idea, my version of the big life. So, ladies and gentlemen, Robin and I want to say thank you for joining us for today's conversation. If this episode blessed you, challenged you, or gave you clarity, share it with someone who's ready to start living with intention.
Yes, and if you haven't done it yet, please be sure to follow, subscribe so you can get updates on our weekly episodes. And please, if you haven't yet, please leave a review. Your support in that way helps this community to grow, and it helps more people to step into their big life. So it helps to spread the word and make a difference in our communities.
Robin, before we leave, I do want to tell you that on most of our platforms, we have 5-star reviews. So
Right
we
on.
just need more 5-star reviews so that we can be exposed to more listeners, to a greater audience. So we're going to leave you as we always do. And that's that we love you, God loves you, and there's nothing you can do about it. And until the next time we see you or you see us, we're right there with you. Peace.
Peace.